Hey guys, it's me Rebecca. So I am here today to do my June wrap up as well discuss a couple books I plan to read in July so far. So yeah, let's get started with the first book I finished in June, which was The Girl with a Thousand Faces by Soon Yindin. And this is about when Mercy Chen washes up on the shores of Hong Kong with no family, no money, and no memories. The only refuge she finds is the infamous ghost-infested slum of Kowloon Walled City. Since then, she has rebuilt her life working for the local tribe as a ghost talker and dealing with the angry and bitter spirits who haunt the district. The filthy gutters and cramped alleyways of Kowloon have become her home. But the past Mercy can't remember isn't done with her. An unusually powerful ghost has infested Kowloon's waterways, drowning innocents and threatening the district. It claims to know Mercy and secrets from her past that are best left forgotten. As Mercy is drawn into a deadly cat-and-mouse game with this malignant spirit, she begins to realize that the monster she fights within these walls may well be one of her own making. And with this, we see how ghosts seem to be part of the everyday life, how some are resentful because of how they died and how they were used during the war, and how others cannot move on for some reason, how people try to please them by leaving offers, while also trying to keep them away by warding their homes to prevent them from entering. How one has so much resentment that they want to destroy the city, and how they feel Mercy is a part of it. This is after World War II, after the Japanese occupation, and we see how the ghosts were treated in the aftermath, how different cultures try to erase them, and how we see how different cultures also deal with the ghosts, and how events affect how people treat them, how some try to get rid of them and forget about them, like we see how some of these ghosts are put almost in this jar, I think it was, and warded in this, kept in a government building to be hidden. And we also see how other people hold them at bay, trying to prevent them from escape from entering, while offering offers to keep them at peace. How war caused them to be resentful, and how they were essentially locked away to avoid being a problem and causing them to be other people's problem. Because the reason Kowloon Walled City was really, I guess, created, I would say, is because the Japanese tried to keep the ghosts in a certain area and only have them be a certain section of the population's problem. And I have notes, and we also see how Mercy's struggling with thoughts that want her to be violent, and how this mysterious figure in her imagination she doesn't know what to do with. She seems to have accepted the fact her memories won't return and made a life for herself in Kowloon. I did like how she feels about a part of the city, how her being familiar with every aspect is comforting and brings a sense of home, how home is a place with familiar sights and sounds and smells. Like, I like that quite a lot. And we also see how the story is essentially about a person who's been through so much and been betrayed so much by those they thought cared about them, that they become vengeful, how they crave for revenge, not only against those who hurt them, but against the entire human population as they see it. It is the nature of people to do harm and not understand until the harm has been done to them. How anger and rage can follow us into our next lives, and the cycle will repeat itself and never end unless we do something. how hatred can be stopped by one person, and not holding on to this rage won't change anything. So yeah, and we do have a character who she just wants people to understand. Like, she kind of says that, like, the politicians don't care about the soldiers they send at war until they're the ones being sent at war, until they see what it's actually like. So it's like trying to wake people up to see the reality of the harm they're causing. And yeah, overall I liked it, and I gave it 4. And the next book I finished in June was Blood on Her Tongue by Joanna van Veen. And this is about the Netherlands in 1887. Lucy's twin sister Sarah is unwell. She refuses to eat, mumbles nonsensically, is increasingly obsessed with a centuries-old corpse recently discovered on her husband's grand estate. The doctor has diagnosed her with temporary insanity caused by a fever of the brain. To protect her sister from a terrible fate in a lunatic asylum, Lucy must unravel the mystery surrounding her sister's condition. But it's clear her sister is hiding something. Then again, Lucy is harboring secrets of her own, too. Then the worst happens. Sarah's behavior takes a turn for the strange. She becomes angry and hungry. Lucy soon comes to suspect that something is trying to possess her beloved sister, or is it madness? As Sarah changes before her very eyes, Lucy must reckon with the dark, monstrous truth or risk losing her forever. And with this, we do have this kind of idea, I guess, of religion versus science, how the way people do things and belief depends on whether they have strong religious beliefs or scientific beliefs. We see this when the body is found, how the workers don't want to touch it due to believing it was cursed, versus Sarah being curious about it, and how those who prefer religion like it for the constancy, I guess. While science is constantly changing, as people used to think getting rid of blood is helpful, and now it is adding blood, and how sometimes it makes things better and other times worse. And we do have this stigma, I would say, of mental illness, how it's not talked about, and if it is, not only does it affect a person but the family. As we see Lucy and Sarah, they had an aunt who was committed to an asylum, and the parents forced them to forget it, that aunt existed, as no one would want to marry them. How even in death, mental illness isn't mentioned when discussing how the deceased died, as it would affect how people treated them in death, like if people would come to their funeral and whatnot. And with the aunt, it's not just, oh, don't talk about the aunt. It's like almost erasing her existence, as it was really Lucy and Sarah's father who had them through everything that related to the aunt. So, and we do see the relationship between the sisters and how outsiders view the relationship, how Lucy and Sarah have always been there for one another, and Lucy doesn't know herself without her twin, something that continues when Sarah changes and becomes something that is not Sarah. How Lucy just wants to protect her, and how others view it as Sarah being, not Sarah, as Lucy being the almost inferior twin, always in her sister's shadow, and how her sister doesn't love her as much as Lucy loves Sarah. Now, there are actions that affect their relationships with other people, like with Michael, and that fact Lucy loved him, but Sarah married him. And Sarah claims it's because it would probably have hurt less for Lucy if Sarah was the one saying goodbye, but I didn't really fully believe it. I don't know if it's also because at this point Sarah was undergoing changes and being something else that wasn't entirely Sarah, I would say. I would have liked to peek into the Will Sarah and how she felt about Lucy, if she cared about her the same way Lucy cared about her, or she just used Lucy, always trusting her to be there. But overall, I enjoyed this, and I gave it 4 stars. And the next book I finished in June was The Architect's Apprentice by Elif Shafak. And this is about, there were 6 of us, the master, the apprentices, and the white elephant. We built everything together, mosques, bridges, madrasas, caravanserais, houses, aqueducts. I think about Istanbul every day. People must be walking now across the courtyards of the mosques, not knowing, not seeing. They would rather assume that the buildings around them had been there since the beginning, since the time of Noah. They were not. We raised them, Muslims and Christians, craftsmen and galley slaves, humans and animals, day upon day. But Istanbul is a city of easy forgettings. Things are written in the water over there, except the works of my master, which are written in stone. Beneath one stone I buried a secret. Much time has gone by, but it must still be there, waiting to be discovered. I wonder if anyone will ever find it. If they do, will they understand? And with this one is how you do see how while the buildings are still the same over time, people change during the building of them due to health or conflict, and to the eyes of the religious, God is the ultimate architect, and everything built is almost a conversation with him. Like, it's like he's guiding you to build this building, and it's like, it can be so perfect as God's the ultimate mastermind, and everything he creates is perfection. And we see how buildings are built up, buildings are taken down due to, I would say, political reasons or religious and scientific reasons. Because we do see, someone who is observing the stars. There's a proper term for what this is, but I'm blanking out on it so badly. But it's like, he wanted to build this observatory to observe the stars, and someone who's quite religious was like, why should we observe God? Like, it's frowned upon and whatnot, and it was taken down. So the buildings are then always permanent, and yeah. And we see the way the world changes as the model progresses, how Jahan sees wars and plagues and pandemics while at conflict with himself if he wants to be good and avoid the one who wants him to steal, or to steal in order to protect his life. It's really how he came to Istanbul, because he came from a village in India, and really to, I guess, pay for his passage on a boat, he agreed to steal for, I think, a sailor. So we see how his world changes with people he loves dying, and the idea his elephant will die and how it affects him. And you see the lessons Jahan learns along the way, how no matter what he does, he will always be a stranger in Istanbul, as he is seen as a foreigner due to him being Indian, and he knows he'll never leave his own mark and be this minuscule part of the history of humanity where he'll be forgotten, and that terrifies him. But also, we see throughout the novel how he's trying to help his master in all ways he can, and yet there's someone always lurking in the shadows, causing some mayhem. Not mayhem, but a lot of accidents seem to occur, especially later in the novel. And it's this really is this, I guess, the journey of his life, the story of this character's life, and character we don't know. And it's like such a, I would say it is a minuscule thing, like I just said, how no one probably remembers who he is, and I don't know, I just found it quite interesting, and overall I gave it 4 stars. The next book I finished in June was The Winners for the Dead by Catherine Addison. And this is about when the young half-goblin Emperor Adri has a rare. It's in Roman numeral, which I never know, but it's like the V and 2 I's. sought to learn who had set the bombs that killed his father and half-brothers. He turned to an obscure resident of his father's court, a prelate of Ulysses and a witness for the dead. Thora Sihar found the truth, though it did him no good to discover it. He lost his place as a retainer to his cousin, the former empress, and made far too many enemies among the many factions vying for power in a new court. The favor of the emperor is a dangerous coin. Now Silar lives in the city of Amal, far from the court, though not exactly in exile. He has not escaped from politics, but his position gives him the ability to serve the common people of this city, which is his preference. He lives modestly, but his decency and fundamental honesty will not permit him to live quietly. As a witness for the dead, he can sometimes speak to the recently dead. See the last thing they saw, know the last thought they had, experience the last thing they felt. It is his duty to use the ability to resolve disputes, to ascertain the intent of the dead, and to find the killers of the murder. Silar's skills lead him out of the quiet into a morass of treachery, murder, and injustice. No matter his background with the Emperor House, Silar will stand with the commoners and possibly find a light in the dark. And with this, I did like how he has to give living people answers they probably didn't want to hear, and how it causes problems in the family to know the uncomfortable truth, and how he feels more comfortable working with the dead than the living, as the living are complicated individuals, and how when people will try to falsify facts by claiming fraud is involved and involving politics, how Thora has to deal with the bureaucracy due to this, and how his personal life is pulled into it, and how he is working to cases that are different and can only ask questions as the evidence, I don't know, isn't there or has been erased, and how some people are more honest than others, which makes his job difficult. So, yeah, overall, I just had fun with this and I gave it 4 stars. And the next book I finished in June was A Master of Jinn by P. D. Jelly Clark. And with this, it takes place in Cairo in 1912. Through Fatima El-Sha'ari is the youngest woman working for the Ministry of Alchemy, Enchantments, and Supernatural Entities. She's certainly not a Wookiee, especially after preventing the destruction of the universe last summer. So when someone murders the members of a secret brotherhood dedicated to one of the most famous men in history, Al-Jaiz, Agent Fatima, is called to the case. Al-Jaiz transformed the world 40 years ago when he opened the veil between the magical and the mundane realms before vanishing into the unknown. This murderer claims to be Al-Jaiz, returned to condemn the modern age for its social impressions. His dangerous magical abilities instigate unrest in the streets of Cairo that threatens to spill onto the global stage. Alongside her ministry colleagues and a familiar face from her past, Agent Fatima must unravel the mystery behind this impostor to restore peace to the city, or face the possibility he could be exactly who he seems. And with this, we do see how Cairo seems to be like this place set apart from the rest of the world, where people go to escape problems in their countries and looking for acceptance, work, and stories how magic and non-magic elements are intertwined, and people are used to it, with the jinn working on, let's say, construction, and this being a part of their lives. But investments are still needed, how even though things are different than in our world, with magic being a legitimate thing, some things still exist, unfortunately, such as hatred and bias against people because of their skin color or from where they're from. We see people judging you on what part of Egypt you're from, even if it's the same country. how women are still fighting to get rights such as the right to vote, work, and while some things might change with like being able to work and whatnot, they still have to face this sexism even though changes have been made. And we see how this imposter is using the anger people have about their circumstances, especially people living in the slums, people who are almost forgotten about by the rest of Cairo, like people who have to live on a bare minimum really, and are really just trying to survive, and how this imposter tries to get them on his side to do what he wants. And there is an element I did like with illusions and how they're created, but it's not only by magic, but in the mundane way, by saying something a certain way or putting a thought in someone's head. Like, I just found that interesting. And we see how someone like doesn't have the power or the access to it will do to have it, and how they think they deserve, and this desire takes over them. Like, we see someone who has a lack of power, a lack of ability, and someone who's overlooked because of their circumstances, how they just want to take back the power they think they deserve, and how once they get a taste of that power, it almost corrupts them. So yeah, I did enjoy this, and I gave it 4 stars. Oh, the last 2 books I read are part of this bind up of the Southern Reach trilogy. And in this bind up, I read in Authority and Acceptance. I'm just gonna give the description of Annihilation, which is book 1 in this series. But Area X has been cut off from the rest of the world for decades, explored only in a series of expeditions dispatched by a secret government agency called the Southern Reach. So far, these expeditions have returned. When they have returned, we have more questions than answers. The first group came back with reports of a pristine Edenic landscape, nature having wiped away the last vestiges of human civilization. The second expedition ended in a mass suicide, the third in a hell of gunfire as its members turned on one another. The members of the 11th expedition returned to the Southern Reach as shadows of their former selves, and within weeks all had died of cancer. At the beginning of the Southern Reach trilogy, we joined the 12th expedition. 4 female scientists from a variety of disciplines prepared to map the terrain, to document the flora and fauna, to collect and analyze samples. But once they cross into Area X, it becomes apparent that the rules of nature as they understand them do not apply, and that the goals and parameters of the mission are much difficult than they have been led to believe. And yeah, I think that's all I'm going to read from that synopsis, because I think it also went into book 2 and book 3. I have book 1 in a separate edition, and that's where I read it from. So, but with Authority, we see what happened in the previous book. I put in my notes as being investigated by Southern Reach, but it's really how those who survive this expedition, they're being questioned, they're following protocol and whatnot, and we see what happened there and what the biologist is hiding as the new director suspects. She remembers part of what happened and is lying, how he is a replacement for the previous director who disappeared in the expedition and was displaying odd behavior. Before, and seemed obsessed with Area X. How the new director, his name is John Rodriguez, but he goes by the nickname Control. And we see how Control is facing difficulties with the assistant director, who isn't helping him and is almost hindering his investigation by being unhelpful and hiding things from him. She seems to be hopeful that the actual director will come back, and he is also dealing with his handler, who's called Boris, and it seems they have an agenda he isn't aware of. We also see how he is trying to figure out what the director was doing prior to her going on the previous expedition, and how there were questionable and strange actions she had taken that could have ruined her career. And because control comes from a family, I would say, of people working in government agencies, with his mom working hard of the agency, we see how a career in the government agencies affected his family, with his mom working for the government and not being able to give his dad actual answers to what she did, and how these secrets destroyed their marriage, and control felt his mom was keeping him at a distance and wasn't there for him. How his examinations have affected him, and the regrets he has about them as well. And yeah, with Authority I did like it, and I gave it 4 stars. And with Acceptance, we learn of the director's history. With her reacts, how she grew up there and was away when the border appeared. You also see the lighthouse keeper in his days prior to the border falling, how there were strange things happening and strange people around. And we come to understand Ariak's better, how time is different there, and how there was no reliable, consistent data, because those who came back from the expeditions were either unable to tell what exactly happened there, and sometimes the expeditions wouldn't come back, and there was no data for the scientists to investigate. So I did find this entire trilogy interesting, and with this last book I gave it 4 stars. And now that is everything I read in June and what I plan to read in July so far. Everything will be in my July wrap up. But next I plan to finish up what is this series called anyway? I think it's like the cemeteries. Oh my word! Yeah, the Cemetery of Forgotten Books. Because I do plan to go into book 3, which is The Prisoner of Heaven by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Let me just see if and this was translated from the Spanish by Lucia Graves. And yeah, I did not pull up what the first book, The Shadow of the Wind, is about. So yeah. And it's book 3 and book 4, which is The Labyrinth of the Spirits, also by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And also translated by Lucia Graves. So yeah. So that is everything I read in June and what I plan to read in July so far. Again, everything will be in my July wrap up. So yeah. And that is all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below telling me what you've been reading recently. If you want to, please subscribe to this channel. And if you want to follow me on any social media, then all those links are in the down bar below. I will see you guys next time I post a video.